Kris, in your work, you must constantly have to engage with public organizations, the private sector, as well as the people sector, because we are talking about smart cities, smart city developments after all. So, Kris, in the countries that you have been involved with, how has the experience been? And I'm sure that there would have been challenges faced. In those challenges, maybe you could share with us how you overcame them as well. So, Kris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, TJ. First, let me thank, ERIA for this opportunity. This is a great opportunity to connect with the brilliant minds here. The question was about the challenges, experiences that I dealt with when it comes to engaging the public, private, and people sector, of course, in line with my work. This is a very important question, really, especially when it comes to smart cities and digital transformation, as mentioned by TJ earlier. In digital transformation, especially in government and in cities, we often think of just three P's, which is basically the public, private, and partnership. Yes, we may throw collaboration, we may throw capacity building here and there, but in my experience, this is kind of like always an afterthought and it's not really a priority. So in most, if not all, digital transformation projects, especially in developing countries like the Philippines, the priority of the government is to get the digital transformation projects up and running right away. How? They look for technology vendors, and of course, they look for resources to fund these particular projects. Thus, going back again, your usual three P's, which is public and private partnerships. So why did I mention this? I mentioned this because I really believe that this is one of the reasons why 70% of e-governance, of digital transformation in the government fail globally. And yet, this still holds true in most developing countries I work in and I work with, and of course, I researched about. However, working with our partners in European Union, however, the experience is very different. The scenario is very different as well. When you look at their projects in smart cities, when you look at their projects in digital transformation, they involve the people sector right on the get-go. They prioritize accessibility, they prioritize sustainability, and even literacy over technologies and systems. So on to your next question, which is a big question. How did I overcome this, challenges? I guess I would answer this. I overcome this with intense and great difficulty. For my organization in Smart City, our approach is hyper-local. So what do I mean by hyper-local? First, rather than focus on assisting big, mega cities, we focus on smaller and medium municipalities and cities. Why do we do that? Because for us, we find them more flexible. We find them more agile and nimble. And of course, the leaders in these particular cities and communities are quite, what do you call this? They have a direct understanding of what is really happening on the ground, on what's the problem on the ground. Second reason that we have is that we also prioritize partnering with universities and patching them up with the local governments. And third, the way we do it in Smart City is that we create open source communities on the ground to ensure the sustainability with the local governments and to sustain the projects, the digital transformation projects in the local governments beyond, the change of leadership. Mostly the digital projects, if especially in the government, once, there's a change of leadership, it will be put on halt. So uh you really need to build a community on the ground to support that. With this, however, partnering with, I guess, the private sector and the technology companies who are willing to work with us, to work with smaller and medium communities is still a challenge. As of course, they tend to, choose bigger and rich and more developed communities to sell their products or to implement their products. That being said, however, I believe it is a great opportunity for startups to come in. Okay? So if anything, this has given me more optimism in terms of the future. So yeah, at the end of the day, the future lies in public, private, and of course, people collaboration, especially when it comes to technologies, so that we can maximally benefit from the digital transformation, so that the technology can also be maximally beneficial for everyone, even for smaller and even for medium cities, and not just the privileged few. On to you, TJ. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that sharing, Kris. I like the term hyper-local. I think it's important to really go onto the ground, to hear the ground, to have a very good feel of the ground, and to let the work start from the ground so that it has a continuity. So thank you very much for sharing that. In your business, and I guess as you continue to engage the tripartite, Kris, what factors or ingredients do you think are important to ensure that these type of partnerships can succeed and flourish in a post-pandemic era? Over to you, Kris.
Thank you. That's a big, question, and I would like to answer this as tangible as possible. So the question was about, the critical factors to consider for successful public, private, and people partnerships. So for me, I think the first step would be trust, and of course understanding where the stakeholders are coming from. So we need to suspend judgment and assume the best intentions amongst each other. Of course, this is, easier said than done, but this can easily be applied if you want to really implement these tripartite partnerships in your own projects. I'll give you like few examples. For example, you work with a government. You noticed that they prioritized procurement uh, over citizen engagement, over capacity building. It is easy for us to conclude that perhaps this might be due to the money involved in the procurement. But what I realized is that sometimes compliance with rules and regulations made them prioritize such. On the other hand, if we work with the private sector, we should also understand that this is a give and take. At the end of the day, they are for profit organizations, right? And of course, there's nothing wrong with that. So in summary, if we really want to orchestrate, the successful tripartite partnerships, these people, public and private partnerships, not only we need to understand what's in it for them, what's in it for us, but as mentioned earlier, we can also leverage on their strengths. The public sector, their strengths, of course, is in coordinating and directing through regulations and policies. The private sector, of course, in responding flexibly, in responding nimbly, and of course, their resources. And of course, we should not forget the people sector, which is they have the most understanding. They have the direct understanding of on the ground problems that we want to solve. So that's trust. And another related factor in terms of trust would be openness and having this, network mindset that you already mentioned earlier. That, a network mindset. What's a network mindset? Wherever you come from, for example, be it you come from private sector or you come from people sector or public sector, we need to treat them as allies instead. Again, of course, this is easier said than done. So Again, I'm coming from the lens of digital transformation in governments, and this is fairly a fast evolving field. And the government cannot do it alone. They cannot do it alone. Let's accept that. Experience and history also show that when it comes to digital government, the usual partnership, which is just the private and public sector partnership, does not necessarily translates to successful digital transformation. So in the digital era, of course, the residents, the civil society, the academics, the private sector need to collaborate with the public officials to mobilize the data and technologies. So what are the practical examples of the same? Of course, if you are government, if you're from the government or if you're from the private sector, which wants to develop, you want to develop a technology, you need to reach out to the residents and ask what kind of digital services they want and engage them in designing and implementing these services. So in summary, I would say that in the digital world, which is today, really, if we are to connect our citizens, if we are to connect our citizens to the public sector and vice versa, and for this collaboration, the private, public, and people sectors to really succeed, we must provide, tailor-fitted services, tailor-fitted projects to what our citizens and what our residents need. While doing so, we should also ensure that these services still protect, their rights and of course, their well-being as well. So basically, we cannot really do what we're doing right now, the status quo. The usual public-private partnerships left us, with projects with no one uses, and initiatives that the people do not really ask for, and they don't know how to use it. So this will really require culture shift, if you may say, from top-down approach to more collaborative approach right on the get-go, not an afterthought, from an open by exception to open by default, and from technology focused or solution focused to people first. So that's it for me. So over to you, TJ.
Thank you very much. In every session, we have new terms that come out from our speakers. Today we've heard hyperlocal, and then you shared this other phrase, network mindset. And I think all these are important, and especially what you shared at the end in terms of a cultural mindset shift that is needed for these tripartite partnerships to flourish as we move ahead. So thank you so much for sharing.